So the UK had a big issue with systemic anti-Semitism from the left with the rise of Corbyn recently. We've seen you and Eve Barlow warn American Jews of something similar happening here. So what can we do to best approach this incoming storm?
Well, thank you so much for asking that question, because it has been difficult, experiencing Corbynism. I joined Twitter in 2018 specifically to join the fight against Corbyn, and it was awful. The British Jewish community, I think much like the American Jewish community, felt at home and felt relatively safe and didn't really feel that anti-Semitism was a major mainstream issue. And Corbynism showed us that that was not the case, that it was a mainstream issue. And even though he lost the last election, I believe it was 10 million people, 10 million British people voted for him, despite all of the press regarding his anti-Semitism. So I think we are in a particularly good place to not teach Americans, because everything differs, right? And the context is different, but certainly dialogue with. So I think I would say to American Jews who are worried is read about Corbynism. If you're able to reach out to Jews who experience Corbynism, look at the response of the Jewish community, and understand the differences and nuances. The British Labour Party is quite a different beast than the American Democrat Party. Even their structures are different. But still, we have to understand that what happened with Corbyn was a global issue. It was not a British issue. He was both a symptom and a cause. He was maybe a cause of it becoming more mainstream in Britain, but absolutely he was a symptom of a pre-existing problem, which is also evident in the United States. So I think, kind of similarly to what I just said, people have to do their homework, people have to read, people have to look at the rhetoric which is being espoused and see where the American kind of problematic rhetoric is tying in with what Corbyn said or what Corbyn supporters said. Look at the similarities, read about him, read about the Corbyn project. But of course, understand the differences. Neither Eve nor myself are saying that it's the exact same. However, we are saying that what happened in Britain is not an isolated occurrence, and that American Jews should be aware that there is a growing problem on the left with the legitimization, normalization of anti-Semitism.
Right. And then a lot of what happened in the UK was happening in the UK because obviously you said 10 million people voted for him, so there's still an effect, and you can still see it online. It's very connected to, and something else you talk about, like the rise of the Soviet form of anti-Semitism connected to anti-Zionism, and how they can sort of like hide behind that. And so that connected to another term that I want to go into, what you've called the end of the golden age of like acceptance of anti-Semitism being bad. Do you think that it's connected to the Soviet anti-Zionism that has seeped into certain places like the UK? And is that connected to the end of the golden era, or is it something else?
I think everything is connected, right? I mean, nothing is happening in isolation. So absolutely, Soviet anti-Zionism has become a part of leftist ideology. Now we have to obviously kind of be nuanced and say, okay, not every leftist is an anti-Zionist. There are of course many Jewish leftists who are proud Zionists, but definitely we can say that it is a problem on the left, and I think probably the majority of the left. So yes, that is an issue. I think that the end of this golden age, and in my book, I even question whether there is a golden age. And I think somebody on Twitter said it wasn't a golden age, it was a guilt age. But regardless of what you want to call it, the end result was the same. There was a relatively short period of acceptance where Jewish people could assimilate, integrate, join the mainstream, seemingly free of anti-Semitism. Importantly, it was relatively short. The quotas regarding American universities and Jews were only taken away in the 60s. So let's not pretend that this was happening for hundreds of years. The reason that happened, or the reason this kind of period of acceptance happened, I believe, is because of post-Holocaust guilt. The Brits, the Americans, really strongly associated anti-Semitism with the Nazis. They fought the Nazis, so therefore they kind of wanted to distance themselves. Also, they had to grapple with the fact that they allowed it to happen. we're not talking about the individual British or American citizens, but absolutely the British and American government administrations during the war knew exactly what was happening. They knew that Jews were being murdered en masse. And even though the non-Jewish world is anti-Semitic, and what I mean by that is, you know, the structures and societies, not necessarily every individual person, but be that as it may, that's still a leap to millions of Jews being murdered. Just because someone kind of has absorbed tropes or stereotypes about Jewish people doesn't mean they're advocating for genocide. So people were really shocked and stunned by the murder of 6 million Jews, 1.5 million Jewish children in the middle of Europe, in the middle of the 20th century. So I think it's that shock led to this acceptance. But the further we get away from the Holocaust, the less guilt people have, or the less guilt people want to have. And then also, we do have this Soviet anti-Zionism, which, you know, claims that it targets a sovereign state, not a tiny ethno-religious community. So people don't feel guilt about Jewish people or anti-Semitism, and then they're also very happy to kind of demonize Israel. But let's be honest, they're demonizing Israel as the collective Jew. So it's kind of an amalgamation of a lot of different things. You know, these things are very complex, multi-layered. As Shrek said, they're like an onion. But yeah, I think that this post-Holocaust golden age is over. And Jeffrey Goldberg, who's the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic magazine, who I think is great, wrote an article that came out in 2015 that was titled, Is it time for the Jews to leave Europe? And this was in reference to the kind of rise in very shocking, aggressive, violent anti-Semitism that erupted in Europe, including Britain, during the 2014 war with Israel and Gaza. And I think that question is appropriate. I'm not advocating for Jews to leave, but I think it's important to discuss it. But I also think now that question applies to the United States as well. And I think that Jewish people should be considering whether they feel comfortable staying. And that's not me for 1 second saying they should leave. It's not me for 1 second saying that America is not, you know, overall safe for Jewish people. But I do think that what we have seen in America, in Britain, and other places should lead Jewish people to kind of at least considering purposefully where they call home.